Well, all right. Ernest Holmes' birthday. Thank you, Ash. That was beautiful. That was an incredible talk of his, too, huh? So what I did for today, is this thing on? All right. Let's put together a bunch of quotes, some of my favorites of his, but first, Sunday school after church. Teachers asking the kids to write out letters to God. One 6-year-old boy writes, "Dear God, just in case you can't turn me into a better kid, I'm really happy just the way I am and having lots of fun." Maybe it was funnier when I read it at home. I don't know. All right. First quote. The science of mind and spirit makes a tremendous claim when it states that the individual should be free from the bondage of sickness, poverty, and unhappiness. It does, however, carefully set forth the conditions under which freedom operates and the laws governing life, starting in no uncertain terms that unless man understands these conditions and obey these laws, he will not receive the full benefits of its teaching. I love that quote because it states very clearly that not only does science of mind work, but it only works if we follow the law the way it works. And if we don't follow the law the way it works, well, it works anyway, but not to our benefit. This follows another quote of his. I thought I put these in the order I was going to use them, but that never works out. I'm up here thinking, yeah, this other quote follows this one really nicely. When we believe that it cannot and will not, then according to the principle, it does not. When it does not, it actually does, only it does according to our belief that it will not. Boy, now that's a mouthful, right? I'm going to put this down. But those two work really well together because it's the heart of what it is we teach here, is that science of mind is working all the time, whether we're conscious of it or whether we're unconscious of it, whether we believe in it or whether we don't believe in it. He's saying that if we don't believe in science of mind, then it's working in a way that we get to see and gain evidence that it's not working. It's still working. It's just working in a way that's now giving us evidence that it doesn't. And in that, it's working. Now, does that make any sense? Yeah, because that's how, electricity, right? You turn on the switch, you turn off the switch. If you don't have it hooked up just right, the way electricity needs to be hooked up, well, then the light's not going on. It has to be hooked up according to the laws of physics, so the electrons get around the whole thing. You break one place in the whole in the circle, then the electricity doesn't get to the light. Does that mean electricity isn't working? Or that it changed the way it works? No. It just means that in that moment, what we've done is set it up so that we have evidence electricity's not working. And yet it's working all the time. Dr. Holmes was so powerful around the idea that what we needed to do was really understand that, number one, it's working all the time, and number two, it's working whether we believe it's working or not, because it comes down to embodiment, and embodiment is the totality of everything going on for us. It's our belief. It's our thinking. It's our actions. It's the race consciousness that comes in that we buy into, to the amount we buy into it. Now, how do we know this is true? Is because miracles happen all the time. Tumors disappear, people all of a sudden out of nowhere come into riches, this happens, that happens. Some people call it luck. But in science of mind, we know there's no such thing as luck, there's only embodiment. And what we embody shows up, and that's what Ernest Holmes was teaching. That's what he was teaching for, as many years as he was around teaching it. We celebrate this man because he stood for something, and he stood for it in a way that allowed it to show up in people's lives. I don't know if any of you know how Ernest got started. So he goes around and he studies with all these different people. And then he decides he has this thing down enough where he starts what he calls treating for people, which is different from prayer, and yet not different from prayer. What's the difference? If you're asking for something or declaring that it's so. A prayer that asks for something is not a treatment. A prayer that declares that it's already done is what makes it a treatment. The more we know, the deeper we know it, the more that shows up the way we know it. Because that's what's happening anyway. What's showing up in our lives is exactly what it is you know. If you want to know what you truly know, take a look at your life. See what you have, that's what you know. You want to have a different life, have something shift, you got to know something different. The only way you can know something different is to know that you don't know what it is you want to know. You gotta know. The only way to shift to know what it is you want to know is you got to know what it is you know presently and know that you don't know what it is you want to know to get there. It's like GPS, right? If you don't put in the address of where you want to go because you think you're already there, imagine yourself sitting in your car in Los Angeles wanting to drive to Seattle and deciding I'm already in Seattle. I already know I'm in Seattle. But how do you get there? The only way you can know what it is you want to know is by first discovering what it is you do know. So in that particular analogy, what you need to know is you're in Los Angeles, not Seattle. Now you know you're in Los Angeles. Now you can put in the address for Seattle, and sure enough, your GPS is going to take you there. Well, that's how the law works. It's working that way all the time. But we spend a lot of time going around thinking we know something we actually don't. And when we do that, the law says, okay, you don't know this, so this is what you get. You know, like for instance, I love people who are struggling with money telling me how they know they're prosperous. If you're struggling with money, you don't know you're prosperous. The second you know you're prosperous, you'll know it because you'll no longer be struggling with money. That's how you'll know. The second you know this is the result you want and it shows up, that's when you know you actually fully know it. Up to that point, you're trying to know it. You're working on knowing it. And those aren't bad things because that's the practice. That's the practice that we're all in right now, is wanting to know what it is we want to know, and the best way to do that is to know what it is we don't know so we can get there. Otherwise, we're not practicing, right? Do you tend to practice what you think you already know? Not so much. You know, we practice what it is we want to know that we don't yet fully embody. Like with guitar playing, and I know I've used this analogy before, right? How my fingers, you know, I got to practice a riff until my body's doing it all by itself, where I don't even have to think about it. That's when I know I got it, when I don't even have to think about it. My fingers just do it, and I'm just standing there going, oh, wow, look at that. They just did that. I actually wind up having that thought of, oh, wow, isn't that cool? My fingers are doing it all by themselves. That's what I know, right? Which leads to the next quote. The possibility of spiritual mind healing, changing environment, controlling conditions, etc., through the power of embodiment rests entirely upon the theory that we are surrounded by universal mind, which reacts to what we embody, and always according to law. Spiritual humanity is perfect, but our individual use of law and law enable us to cover a perfect idea with an apparently imperfect cloak. I love that. I love the idea what he's talking about here. What he's talking about is each one of us is perfect. And yet, we can certainly see ourselves as not that way. Certainly, we can see our president not that way, or somebody else, or our government not that way. It's easy to start looking outside and seeing, oh my God, this isn't perfect. And yet when we do that, we have also covered up our own with our cloak. There's nothing going on that isn't perfect. I was listening to a Dave Chappelle special last night, and I love his comedy. And he was talking about the perfection of how things unfold, because even when it looks horrendous, because of what comes out of it. There's an old Zen proverb about a farmer who's working on his farm when all of a sudden his prize horse escapes, and his neighbor comes over and goes, "Oh, that's horrible." And the farmer goes, "We'll see." A little while later, the horse comes back with 3 other horses. Really beautiful horses. Neighbor comes over and goes, "That's incredible." And the farmer goes, "We'll see." Then his son, the farmer's son, tries to break the new horses, falls and winds up breaking his leg. Neighbor comes over and goes, "Oh, that's terrible." Farmer goes, "We'll see." Little while later, the army comes in, taking all the able-bodied sons to war, and can't take his son because his leg's broken. Neighbor comes over again and goes, "Wow, that was really lucky." And of course, the farmer said, "We'll see." Jesus said, nothing, actually it was Shakespeare, he said, "Nothing is good or bad. Believing makes it so." Which leads us to the next quote. Hopefully it's the next quote. It's the next one in my mind. Yeah, right here. "The Spirit of Christ means that embodiment which recognizes the law and uses it for constructive purposes only. The spirit of Antichrist means the spirit of the individual understanding the law uses it destructively." The law works the way the law works. We get, it's not just about love and light. That law works however we apply it. It is the Christ consciousness within us that allows us to use it for good. Use it for good, not evil. The power of the force. But this is what we have, is our ability to choose. But if we think that automatically, there's tons of billionaires who are not spiritually evolved. There are people who are healthy. I'm going to repeat that's part of next week, so I don't want to get into that too much. Next week's talk is called Let's Cut Through the Bull. And so we're going to get into this a lot deeper then, but today is really about celebrating Ernest Holmes. So I'm going to do my best to stay on course. But the idea here being, what Ernest wanted to say there is it isn't, automatically good when people use the law to create. That in fact, we could use it for good or we call evil or anything. The law is incredibly impersonal and simply creates by what we embody. God, Spirit, whatever we want to call it, isn't up there making a judgment about what's good and bad. There's no being out there making a judgment about good and bad. That's up to us, because we all have free will and we get to decide. The law is going to work the way the law works. Whoever embodies the strongest wins. If you want to embody goodness in the world, you got to stand for it. But then Ernest tells us willpower isn't, you can't force this law. It have to fall into what he calls the calm assurance. And I want to get this right because it's also one of my favorite quotes of his. I should have marked that one. Well, we'll get there when we get there. So we learn to go deeply within ourselves and speak as though there were a present there that knows. And we should take the time to unearth this hidden cause, to penetrate this inner chamber of consciousness. It is most worthwhile to commune with Spirit, to sense it and feel it. The approach to Spirit is direct, through our own consciousness. The student should take time every day to see his life as he wishes it to be, to make a mental picture of his ideal. He should pass this picture over to the law and go about his business with a calm assurance that on the inner side of life, something is taking place. It's not willpower, it's calm assurance. I think about that a lot, the calm assurance. I think about it every time time seems to be getting away from me. I remind myself, time is on my side. When things start looking like, for instance, the PowerPoint's not working, I know that the service will work anyway, the celebration works anyway. When the lights on the streaming, for some reason, are darker than usual, I go, this still has to be good. Because it's up to me to say that. It's up to me to declare it. I'm the one that decides whether something is good or not in my life. And the better I can embody that, the more that kind of stuff shows up when things go haywire. Now, I don't know anybody who doesn't have something go haywire at some point, or at least not the way they want. The question is, what happens then? Now, there have been lots of times in my life where I have reacted to those circumstances in a way that made things worse. It takes a lot of practice to respond in a way that remembers what's truly going on here. Because I get to embody in the moment things are going haywire, the goodness of it all, and remember the divine presence in everything. I get to rise above it, or not. Now, do I get it right every single time? Heck no, but I can tell you once I walk in these doors, I do a lot better because I'm the guy here. I am motivated here and out there and everywhere to stand in a place of higher consciousness. I highly recommend, as I mentioned last week, finding something in your life that motivates you to a higher consciousness, that makes you want to be better, that makes you want to stand up whether your circumstances change or not. Because that's what's really possible. There is a spiritual presence in everything, and everything is a learning opportunity, and especially when things are going haywire. The fun part about reading Ernest Holmes is that it takes a little practice to understand what the heck he's talking about. You know, you got to kind of dig in there a bit. And so that's what we do around here, is we take these quotes and we dig into them. Healing is not a process, but a revelation. For revealing of the perfect person always heals. You know, in our movement, we have a saying, there's nothing to be healed, only truth to be revealed. But Ernest talked a lot about healing. He actually talked a lot about the idea that healing is in the congruency in our spiritual nature with our human nature. That's really what he's talking about here. The more our spiritual nature gets in line with our human nature, the more we can heal, the more we feel alive, the more we feel like life is incredibly vital and fun and important and meaningful. I don't know, important's the wrong word, but meaningful is the right word there. You know, we bring meaning to our own lives. Even Carl Jung said that psychology isn't going to get you there alone, that a true healing takes a spiritual practice, a spiritual nature. That's what he discovered. Ernest knew that all along. Ernest had been talking about that since he was in his 30s. I mean, this man awakened to something that then got to touch the rest of our lives. We celebrate this man on his birthday because he had it going on. And he had people just flocking to him, thousands upon thousands who just wanted what he had, who wanted the idea. One of the beautiful things that I love personally about Ernest was that the Buddhist nature of suffering. He understood that Buddhists were not connected to something called the creative process. And so he wanted to somehow discover how we could be in a creative process and yet still alleviate most of our suffering. The science of mind helps us do that. It helps us create in the world. It takes the creative process and allows us to use it in any way we want as individuals. The beauty of the one mind that he talked about was we as individuals get to express it any way we want. And we do so in billions of different ways every single day. We're expressing one mind through ourselves as individuals into a world of magic and wonder. The adventure that's possible in life because of what, this man did not invent what came forward, and he truly admitted that. But he put it together in a way that we could see step by step that this could be treated like a science, so that we could take it on, so that we had something to practice. And in that practice, he was all about the results. So he got started by treating for people. And as he's treating for people, they're getting results. The results are showing up in their lives. And so they're telling other people about it. And then they're coming and they're wanting to treat with him too. And that happens so often that what people having these miracles happening in their lives through Ernest treating for them, praying for them, that finally people wanted him to talk about it. They wanted him to say, how are you doing this? And so he started talking about it. And then he got together with his brother, and they put together the Science of Mind textbook. But he didn't start by talking about it. I want to be clear, he started by doing it, by practicing it, by walking it. And then he started talking. But he walked it first. When we bring a lamp into a darkened room, where does the darkness go? The darkness neither came nor did it go anywhere. It never was a thing of itself, merely a condition. And we have power over our conditions by merely bringing in the light. The darkness vanished into a native nothingness. This is the power of reality over seeming opposition and apparent separation. Life is a blackboard upon which we consciously or unconsciously write those messages which govern us. Spirit cannot be or become antagonistic toward us. It always flowing into us and ever expressing itself as us. This self-expression of spirit is also the self-expression of each of us, or the two are one. The I am is both individual and universal. All individuality merges into universality. All forms are rooted in one common creative mind and Spirit of God as the spirit of humanity. That's poetic, you think? The spirit of mind is in all of humanity. No matter if they're Republican or Democrat, Chinese or North Korean, it's the same one mind going on everywhere. It's so hard to see sometimes. It's so easy to get lost in thinking that that's bad, this is good, we must take action, we must do something, and I'm not saying don't take action. Believe me when I say, I'm not saying don't take action. But when we take action, the way Gandhi took action, when we take action the way Martin Luther King took action, we take it from a place of knowing that, of course, love wins. Amen. Love always wins. Because more of us are standing up, and the more and more of us that stand up in that place, we understand the embodiment. Don't get caught up in the crossfire. Don't get caught up in the rhetoric. Words have power. We have to be clear. You don't want to be naming something. You want to look beyond it. When something happens in your life that you know there's something better for you, that this isn't it. hold the mental equivalent of what that is. Walk in the knowing that that is what's available to all of us. That thing beyond what it is, that circumstance we don't like. It's here. In the beyond, it's here. That's a hard one. In the beyond, it's here. If we embody it, the moment we embody it. This is what I learned from this guy. What the world needs is spiritual conviction, followed by spiritual experience. I would rather see a student of this science prove its principle than to have him repeat all the words of wisdom that have ever been uttered. It is far easier to teach the truth than it is to practice it. The essence of spiritual mind healing and all of the true religious philosophy is an inner realization of the presence of perfection within and around and about. It is the hope of heaven, the voice of God proclaiming, I am that which thou art which I am. We are one with this amazing power. Every one of us is one with this amazing power. The birds, the dogs, the cats, everything. He knew this. He saw it. That's what's so beautiful about the speech that Ash moved to today, is he saw it. And that's available to each and every one of us. Rise up. Let us all rise up together. Let us all know the truth, that there is something beyond what it is we're seeing. Let's celebrate this great man by standing for what he stood for and seeing it manifest in the world. Let's see principle manifest. Let us practice until it manifests. Let us stand tall and keep at it until peace, love manifest, because it's absolutely possible in our lifetime. I love you. All right, take out what you're going to give. Hold it in your hand. Hold it in your hand. Because this has power. Don't crumple it up, open it up. This has power. This is your God essence coming out into the world to return to you. This is how you get into the law of circulation. You give out so that it returns to you. Take out what you're going to give. And in your program is the prosperity affirmation. God, say it with me. God is the source of all supply. Money is God in action. What we give, we receive multiplied abundantly. All that God is, I am. And so it is.
You are the face of God. I hold you in my heart. You are a part of me. You are the face of God. You are the face of God.